Tonight, many of America's farmers already feeling the pinch are worried about the possibility of more challenges.
Trump decided he wasn't going to give us our farm check. That's fine. We're just going to burn the crops. Let everybody starve.
And we're going to lose another generation of farmers.
American wheat exports are quietly unraveling, and no one's calling it what it is, a collapse. In just under 6 months, $2.7 billion worth of wheat exports have vanished from U.S. trade ledgers. Longtime buyers, the Philippines, South Korea, Mexico, Italy, even France have shifted their orders elsewhere. Not out of hostility, not because of sanctions, but because something more decisive happened. They signed with Canada instead. No press conferences, no angry statements, just silence and a redirection of grain ships away from American ports. In places like Sonora, Naples, and Seoul, flour mills that once relied on U.S. wheat now process grain from Saskatchewan. And back in the U.S., from Nebraska to Kansas, farmers are watching loaded silos sit untouched. This isn't a story about crop failure. The wheat is there. It's clean. It's ready. It just isn't wanted. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Because when global buyers walk away without warning and without returning, the market doesn't crash overnight. It drains quietly. In Oklahoma and South Dakota, the images are gut-wrenching. Farmers torching perfectly good wheat, not because it's spoiled, but because there's simply no buyer. The silos in Kansas are overflowing. Grain inventories have surged more than 40% compared to this time last year. Elevators that were once hubs of rural commerce now sit full, unable to take in another bushel. And with no destination in sight, freight trains remain idle boxcars loaded with wheat that won't leave the station. It's not a production issue, the crop is healthy. And it's not a logistics breakdown, the rail lines and roads are intact. The crisis is demand. Global markets are walking away from American wheat quietly and decisively. And the response? Silence. No emergency subsidies. No federal response. Just rural communities watching their livelihoods rot in storage or go up in flames. What's unfolding now isn't a sudden collapse. It's a slow, quiet burn. A disintegration of trust in U.S. agricultural reliability playing out acre by acre, silo by silo. And the worst part, this isn't a natural disaster. It's man-made and it's spreading.
With tariff talks top of mind, South Florida farmers say they're in trouble. Crops are rotting on the vine, and they're blaming the ongoing trade wars and immigration changes.
For decades, the Philippines was one of the most loyal buyers of American wheat, importing nearly 3 million tons annually, with up to 90% of its wheat supply coming directly from U.S. farms. It wasn't just a trade relationship, it was a strategic agricultural partnership. But that trust quietly broke in May 2025. In a move that stunned Midwestern exporters, the Philippines abruptly canceled a 12,000-ton order from the U.S. and replaced it with a massive 110,000-ton deal split between Canada and Australia. There was no dramatic fallout, no public rebuke, just a spreadsheet update and a redirection of ships. On paper, American wheat was cheaper sometimes by $8 or $10 per ton, but buyers saw it as a liability. Sources inside Philippine Milling Association cited growing worries about U.S. political volatility, disruptions in shipping insurance tied to tariff disputes, and delays at American ports. Even rumors of new export restrictions were enough to tip the balance. In contrast, Canadian wheat came with fewer risks, stable pricing, clean certification, and smoother logistics. Australia's supply, though smaller, was backed by strong trade diplomacy in Southeast Asia. The shift wasn't about this year's harvest. It was about next year's confidence. And when confidence breaks, so do contracts. Across the Atlantic, another rupture, only this one carried the weight of history. For over a century, the U.S. and France maintained a quiet agricultural bridge. American wheat regularly flowed into French mills, supporting everything from baguettes to biofuel. But in 2025, that link all but disappeared. U.S. wheat imports to France fell to their lowest level in over 20 years, effectively signaling the end of an era. French importers didn't mince words. The carbon footprint is too high, the residue levels are inconsistent, the paperwork is chaotic. That was the assessment from one major cooperative director in Dijon, speaking to a domestic agricultural outlet. Meanwhile, Canada was ready. Its wheat exports to the EU surged by 40%, with France leading the buying. The reasons were clear: Canada's cleaner certification process, its alignment with EU sustainability metrics, and its aggressive export financing strategy made it the preferred alternative. Back in the U.S., the consequences hit hard and fast. In Kansas, planned mill expansions were abandoned. silo owners began quietly halting maintenance, knowing full well that the grain inside might never leave. Hundreds of thousands of tons of wheat are now sitting idle, degrading in quality and draining the hope of entire rural economies. This wasn't a price war. The U.S. didn't get outbid, it got out-trusted. And when trade partners no longer believe in your system, your reliability, your process, your stability, they don't fight. They just stop picking up the phone. Just a year ago, South Korea sourced over 35% of its wheat from the United States, a cornerstone in a $500 million grain relationship. But by mid-2025, that number had been slashed to just 17%, replaced almost entirely by Canadian wheat, now commanding over 60% of the Korean market. The trigger: glyphosate levels. Independent lab tests revealed U.S. wheat samples containing 200 to 400 parts per billion ppb of glyphosate, a level significantly higher than Canada's standard of 30-70 ppb. The backlash was immediate. Korean food safety agencies flagged U.S. wheat as high risk. Major corporations like Nongshim SPC and Orion, the producers behind Korea's biggest noodle and bakery brands, quickly scrapped all U.S. suppliers. At ports like Busan and Incheon, customs inspectors began rejecting U.S. shipments outright. Some never even made it to unloading, redirected mid-voyage, or held indefinitely. The fallout back home was devastating. In Washington state and Idaho, silos overflowed as inventory levels climbed 36%. Farmers began slashing future planting plans, unsure if their crops would ever find a buyer. This wasn't about price. This was about perception and the loss of trust in U.S. agricultural standards. The shock was even deeper south. Mexico, one of the most historically reliable buyers of American wheat, slashed imports by nearly 40% in the first half of 2025. And it didn't go to Brazil or Argentina. It went north to Canada, whose exports to Mexico surged by 37% in just 6 months. Why the switch? Not price. U.S. wheat was offered at up to 20% discounts. Still, buyers refused. The real issue was customs complexity. Mexican importers cited ever-changing U.S. documentation, increasing delays at the border, and an unpredictable regulatory environment. In interviews, logistics directors described it as too risky to plan around. The consequences in the U.S. were brutal. In Arizona and Texas, several flour mills and logistics hubs shuttered operations. Entire trainloads of wheat sat idle, waiting for buyers who never came. Even attempts to slash prices couldn't revive the flow. Meanwhile, Manitoba invested in a dedicated testing and certification facility designed specifically to meet Mexico's phytosanitary and tonnage documentation standards, a bold move that signaled Canada's long-term strategy to replace the U.S. as Mexico's top wheat supplier. The message was clear: it wasn't just about quality anymore, it was about reliability. And the United States, once the gold standard, was now seen as the gamble. For decades, American Durum wheat helped feed Italy's booming pasta industry. From Bologna to Bari, U.S. shipments quietly filled the gap whenever local harvests fell short. The grain was dependable, affordable, and for a long time irreplaceable. But in 2025, a quiet shift began. Without protest, without press conferences, Italian buyers walked away. U.S. market share in Italy collapsed to just 15%, its lowest in decades. Meanwhile, Canada surged ahead, seizing 45% of the market and becoming the new backbone of Italy's pasta production. It wasn't a price war, it wasn't politics. The answer was simpler: precision, predictability, and performance. Canada's Durum wheat delivered exact protein levels, precise gluten strength, and ideal elasticity every single shipment, every single batch. The numbers matched the contracts and the trucks arrived on time. No surprises, no excuses. Meanwhile, American shipments began to falter. Moisture variability, delays at customs, and last-minute inspection issues began to raise eyebrows. What used to be a dependable trade became a logistical question mark. And for Italian pasta producers, that's unacceptable. This wasn't about nationalism. There were no boycotts, no harsh statements, no angry headlines in La Repubblica. Importers simply stopped calling. The silence was louder than any declaration. Because in Italy, pasta isn't just a product, it's cultural heritage. It's the dinner table, the Sunday gathering, the soul of the South. There's no margin for error. When one shipment of inconsistent semolina can ruin 1,000 pounds of spaghetti, trust isn't optional. It's everything. Canada delivered that trust. America, once the gold standard, began to wobble. And in the world of food, where taste and texture are everything, even a 0.5% drop in protein consistency is a deal breaker. Canada didn't win this race by undercutting prices. In fact, Canadian wheat is often 3 to 5% more expensive per ton than U.S. exports in major markets like Italy, South Korea, and the Philippines. And yet buyers still choose it not because it's cheaper, but because it's safer, smarter, and engineered for consistency. What Canada offers isn't just grain, it's a turnkey ecosystem. Every kernel is real-time scanned for protein content, moisture level, and contamination. Each shipment is tagged, lab-certified, and AI-tracked from silo to ship. Rail networks are linked to inland logistics hubs, which are synced with customs, and maritime terminals, forming a single, uninterrupted chain that eliminates bottlenecks and paperwork shocks. Predictive delivery windows mean buyers can plan inventory with confidence. Insurance is embedded in the process, not tacked on after. And deviations from contract specifications virtually zero a standard that U.S. exporters with decentralized infrastructure and shifting federal rules increasingly struggle to meet. In 2025, Canadian wheat doesn't just arrive faster, it arrives exactly as promised, often within 12 days of contract from prairie to port. This isn't just good policy. It's an export doctrine built on precision and foresight. Because in today's volatile trade climate, every customs delay, every spec dispute, every missing form isn't a small hiccup, it's a million-dollar mistake. And the buyers know it. America still grows more grain. But Canada is now winning the war of systems. The future of agriculture isn't just about yield, it's about trust traceability and total delivery control. And in that game, Canada isn't just competing, it's leading. While grain markets shifted, Washington stood still, or worse, stumbled backward. Over the past 18 months, tariff threats, last-minute export license revisions, inconsistent phytosanitary inspections, and a growing backlog at U.S. ports have turned every wheat shipment into a high-risk proposition. International buyers from Seoul to Sonora began asking the same question: can we still rely on the U.S.? The answer increasingly was no. Trust isn't built with subsidies, it's built with certainty. But in 2025, American policy became erratic, swinging from protectionist rhetoric to regulatory confusion. And while Washington bickered internally, Canada acted. It poured billions into a vertically integrated export system, on-farm sensors, AI-driven grain quality tracking, harmonized customs paperwork, and a national logistics dashboard connecting transports and weather data in real time. The result, a system buyers could depend on not just once, but every time. And so, even when U.S. wheat was cheaper by $8 or $10 a ton, the world turned north. Because in today's food trade, the price on paper means little without peace of mind. Now, America, once the breadbasket of the world, is left chasing the very markets it used to lead. And the bitter truth, trust doesn't collapse with headlines. It vanishes in silence. One shipment rerouted, one contract unsigned, and suddenly a century-old advantage is just gone. Do you think the U.S. can regain global trust? Or is this the quiet end of American farm dominance? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more global trade breakdowns and economic insights where numbers speak louder than slogans.